Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Made for More podcast. It's me, your host, Ali Nitschke, and this is an Ali Speaks episode. Today, we are diving into one of the biggest conversations that is shaping leadership and workplaces right now, and that is AI and the future of work. Now, before you roll your eyes and think, oh gosh, here we go again, another hype piece about robots taking over, stick with me because I have quite a different perspective when it comes to AI and the future of work. But the truth is, AI isn't only about robots replacing us. My goodness, it is really around how leadership responds to change and how we're going to be using technology and AI to create workplaces that are not just more efficient, but actually more human. And I think that's really the paradox, isn't it? The more technology evolves, the more important our humanity becomes as leaders. So, what I wanted to do today is really unpack what that might mean for you, where we've come from, how we're going to navigate this ahead. And what's really prompted this episode actually is I was listening to the radio this morning, and I very rarely listen to radio. I'm often consuming audiobooks or podcasts and that type of thing. But there was an ad, and I haven't heard an ad in ages. And the differentiator, so the ad for this particular business was saying, if you call us at our call center, we are humans and we are local and we are not robots and we are not chatbots and we are not offshore. And I thought, isn't that interesting that the way, and the entire ad was basically saying that our differentiator is that we have real humans at the end of the phone. And it really got me thinking about how that is now becoming part of what we're using to differentiate the business is going to, how human are you really versus, how good is the service or how good is the product or the widget or whatever it happens to be. Anyway, today's episode is kind of in 3 to 4 parts. So what I really want to talk about in part one is the evolution. So what we've seen evolving over time, because AI has been around for a long while. I think it's just become more mainstream probably in the last 18 months to 2 years. Part two is really going to be looking at the leadership challenges that I'm seeing with my clients, with the industries that I work with. And then part three is really what this means for workplaces. So what does it actually mean, IRL, in real life? And then I wanted to give a few examples of how I'm seeing this kind of play out in real time and what I think is going to be happening more into the future, and then what you can do as well. So let's jump into part one of what I want to be talking about today, which is the evolution of AI in the work. So this is the past, the present, and of course, the future. So really, to understand where we're going, we need to have a look about where we've come from. Isn't that so true? And AI has definitely not landed overnight. It's arrived in waves. Each wave has really reshaped workplaces in real and tangible ways. And if we look really closely, what we can see that's already happening and then where it's really going. So let's have a look at kind of the first wave, which was all around automation. So if we were to look at this from a timeline perspective, it began in about 2010 to about 2020. And this first wave was all about the automation. So thinking things like data entry, invoice processing, some of those repetitive tasks, the things that are not necessarily glamorous, but they are necessary. This was about machines doing work nobody really wanted to do. And this era, so the automation era, was really around replacing repetitive tasks, so back office functions, rule-based customer service, data entry, even things like rostering. And it's probably when we started to see as consumers when there was like chat bots or chats happening on websites where you could ask a question and kind of get your frequently asked questions were being answered in an automated way. So how this looked, there was things like banks, I think, were really early on with the chatbots that could handle, balance checks, how much money do I have in my account? And sort of those simple, basic, repetitive queries that happen. Retailers were automating payroll and some of their scheduling. Now, I work a lot with HR and people and culture teams, and I think, payroll obviously pretty important for the largest asset most companies have. But to be able to automate that can really take a load off. I remember back in my early career days, and these departments, payroll department, for example, were, do not talk to us for the next 5 days because we're processing payroll. And when we think about how much value back we can be giving people when that's automated, it really is a game changer. In industries, particularly in government, there was the digitization, which was, replacing thousands upon thousands of manual forms with things like online submissions. And with that, of course, improves our ability to search and find archive material. So in terms of speeding up the process and reducing manual work or labor, it's no, probably not manual labor. That's the wrong use of the word. Manual work. Most of that was sort of done early on and started to really come to life in 2010. And what this has meant for the reality for staff, for workers, is that some roles did disappear. But what most people or many people found was there was actually like the relief from the mundane tasks. So instead of spending hours entering data, they've moved into more of that value adding activities, like whether it's customer relationships or problem solving. Or I know when we do our strategy work with, some of our exec teams, it's things like, oh, that's a project that I'll do later when I have time. And imagine if we've got time, then all of a sudden we can start putting those nice to have, in air quotes, nice to have projects start coming to life, which is really cool. And one of the leadership challenges back then was really helping people shift their identity from task doers to value creators, which I think there's still a lot going on in that space right now. All right, that is the first wave, so the automation wave. Then we've got wave two, which is really around augmentation. So the second wave, this is about from 2020 to 2025, where we are right now. And when we're thinking about augmentation, this is really where, AI isn't just doing things for us, it's working with us. And it helps things like triaging insurance claims, for example, summarizing council papers, which can be really handy, and it even transcribes, doctor's notes, and it's taking away the grind so that people can focus on higher value work. Again, how do we add value? How do we add value? So AI doesn't just replace the tasks, it assists the humans, but it's not about removal. It's really all around that reinforcement. And what we're seeing today, what I'm seeing today is, things like AI transcribing doctor-patient conversations so that clinicians can focus on care. So like there's a lot of that kind of summarizing happening. In fact, in my business, I use a note taker AI tool. I use Fathom, but there's heaps out there. And when I finish having a meeting, whether it's a coaching session or whether it's a meeting with a client or a potential client, it does like a summarization. And it'll be like, Ali said she's going to do X, Y, and Z. And you said you were going to do X, Y, and Z. And here were the key topics. And in terms of being able to, historically write minutes for a meeting, this is fantastic because it just sends everyone a copy of the summarized meeting, which has saved a lot of time in my business. And that's just one of the ways that we use AI IRL in real life, and a case study for that. I think there's some real clever ways that people are using the augmentation now. And, if I think about finance, for example, so like triaging of claims, there's, flags that get set for any anomalies, any kind of first draft responses happening for emails, which can be a big game changer as well. And what this allows is it's giving back people time. So our most precious commodity, it's giving back and freeing up staff for more complex decisions, more complex and hopefully creative projects to really focus on. What I'm seeing in education, which is really cool, is around generating lesson plans or analyzing, that student data so teachers can spend more time teaching. I know certainly in like higher education for the universities that I work with, there has been definitely the juggling of are students allowed to use AI to write their essays, for example, and what will we use to check this? And I think what we're starting to see now, and it's certainly becoming more and more mainstream, is just because AI said it doesn't actually mean it's true. So there's always going to have to be that human element in there to go, actually, is this true? And do I want to put my name on it, or do I maybe need to do a little bit more fact checking, including the citations as well? So, what this period that we're in right now, the augmentation wave, is the reality for workers is the repetitive admin is shrinking. And while human skills like, judgment, empathy, and creativity are really becoming more and more valuable. But what has happened is it's coming with a bit of anxiety. I think if AI can do this much, insert never-ending activities that can be automated. Where do I fit in from my human element? And if I go back to that example earlier for the radio station, there is definitely some value out of going, actually, we've got real people. This is not just an automated chatbot, whatever it happens to be. So I think the customer service side of work is going to be really, really prevalent in the next couple of years. And for our leaders, the challenge over the last, 5 years has really been framing that AI as augmentation, not replacement, building trust and capability, and some of those guardrails so that people feel really empowered and not threatened. So, next one coming up is wave three. So, this is kind of the next 10-ish years. Now, you've probably heard on episodes before, I'm saying 10-ish tongue in cheek because what we're seeing happening with AI and the way that it's impacting work is it's happening faster than we can possibly perceive. So where we're saying 10 years, maybe less than 10 years, but for right now, where I'm recording this right now, over the next 10 years, the third wave, which will be the human and AI collaboration wave. And this is really what's emerging and what we're seeing. This is where AI is becoming embedded in our decision making, in our strategies, in the way that our teams operate day to day. And this is the wave that we're entering where AI won't just sit on the edges. It's not going to be just in the peripheral. It'll be really important and it will be integrated into the strategy. So the AI strategy, decision making, and everyday workflows. Now, you may or may not have heard, I wrote a special report on this. So, the future of leadership in the age of AI. And I do talk about how we need to really be focusing on the people part of leadership and AI, which, rather than just the tool of AI. And that's where this collaboration piece is going to come in really handy. And my grandma used to say, just because you can doesn't mean you should. And that is so true for AI. Like if we can do it, absolutely fantastic. But is it the best for the business? Is it the best for the team? Is it the best that we're going to be? Is it the best decision that we need to be making right now? Something to consider, but rather than just going, yep, like just because AI can do it, is it actually the best case scenario? And what the future, I think, will look like, again, this can change rapidly, is, things like project management, for example. AI won't just schedule meetings. It'll actually anticipate some of those risks. It'll suggest reallocations. It'll simulate outcomes, which I think is really interesting when we're going, well, how do we make decisions? And our ability to plan for the future is to be able to go, well, here are some of, here's 5 different outcomes that could possibly happen in our market with the disruption of AI. And interestingly, there was a survey that came out that surveyed CEOs around, will your business still be sustainable or still be viable in the next 5 years? I think it was. I'm making a hack job of this. I'll put it in the notes. Will your business still be viable in the next 5 years if you keep doing what you are doing? And it was something like 47% said no, actually, it's not going, like our business will dissolve or disappear if we keep going. So I think being able to recognize the impacts that AI and those peripheral industries that you partner with is going to be really important to go, if this, then what would that mean for us? And planning accordingly. So those outcome pieces and scenario pieces are really, really important. In leadership, I think we're going to start seeing more of these like AI dashboards that will show like energy levels and engagement signals and workflow risks and giving leaders real-time insight that they've never had before. I think pulse surveys, we all know what a pulse survey is. They've been around for a while. I think we're going to see the emergence of like micro pulse surveys, but it could come from things like syncing up your heart rate monitor with a dashboard. And I know if you go back a couple of episodes, I've got an interview there with Dr. Christy Goodwin, and she does some amazing work with high performers around wearables and sleep and how much that impacts people's ability to show up and perform at work. And I do wonder if we're going to see even more of that kind of merging of going, well, how are your energy levels when you show up to work? Where are you up to? That's going to provide real time feedback for us to be able to make really good decisions as leaders, because I think we need to lead in a different way than what we have before, and having that insight is going to be really key. So the reality for workers, for staff, is that entire roles are going to evolve. I can't think of any role really that will not change in some capacity. Some of you might be going, oh my God, that's so scary. And others will be going, okay, that's a little bit exciting. I wonder what will happen. We know that some jobs will absolutely disappear and other ones will emerge. And some of the ironic predictions for the roles that are going to emerge, the jobs that are going to be emerge, is really human checkers. So humans, people, real life people, their job is going to be checking that their AI is doing what it's meant to be doing. Ethics is always going to play into it, and if you do not have ethics in your AI strategy, please stop, hold the phone, and wait until you start talking about what is okay for you individually and as a business, and what is not okay. For workers, things like prompt engineers is going to be really important. How do you write prompts that give you the results that you're actually after? Again, this is like discernment and understanding what you want the outcome to be. And human machine collaboration. So people won't be replaced at sort of like en masse wholesale, but their tasks will transform dramatically over the next 10 years. And dare I say, I think probably we'll do it quicker than that. And if we think, okay, leadership hat on, the leadership challenge for tomorrow is going to be leading alongside AI. So I don't think leaders are necessarily going to be replaced. They're just going to have to lead differently. And that means knowing how to interpret AI insights, balancing data with human judgment. My goodness, one of the life skills we're trying to teach our children at the moment is discernment. Like, how do you actually check? How do you have critical thinking? Interestingly, my 12-year-old, whenever he sees anything online, his first assumption, and if we go back to like generations, this will be kind of one of the early Gen Alphas, will be entering the workforce. But his early assumption is to go, "Ooh, is that fake or is that real?" And I'm like, oh, isn't that interesting that the assumption is going, okay, that's fake or that's scripted or, that's not real life. So balancing the data with the human judgment is going to be huge, and keeping the culture and ethics at the center. So the people part of business, guess what? We've done a full circle here. So that is really the third wave. What we're going to be seeing sort of from next year onwards. We'll start to see it happening in some businesses now, but really going, how are we going to balance leadership to work alongside of the humans? And when we talk about AI, it is never, ever a single moment in time. It is a journey. And I think leadership is like this anyway. There is no final destination. Ironically, I shouldn't joke about that. Each wave has asked more of leaders, first to reassure, then to retrain. And now we're getting into that reimagine space there as well, which is really key. And one of the kickers to keep in mind for this is that each wave, it's never, ever reduced the importance of leadership. It's actually amplified it. So I think the real question isn't what can AI do. The real question is, how do we lead in an AI enabled world? I think that's a good question. Part two, this is really around like leadership challenges. So, what are we seeing? What do I think are going to be some of the leadership challenges outside of what I've already talked about? And that is that this shift is really going to require some leadership courage. In fact, a lot of leadership courage, the courage to communicate openly, the courage to redefine success, the courage to measure things differently, and the courage to admit that sometimes you don't have all the answers, but you're willing to learn alongside your team. Now, you may or may not know, I wrote a book. It was actually my very first book in 2021, and it was called The Rise of the Courageous Leader. Now, I've been talking about courageous leadership for years and years. If you want a copy of Rise of the Courageous Leader, check out the show notes and you can grab one online there. I'll sign it for you and pop it in the post. But it is the 10 C's around courage, and they are all of the soft skills, air quotes. They're not soft skills, they're the power skills that you need to be able to lead into the future. So it's called Rise of the Courageous Leader. It's an Amazon bestseller. It is one of my favorite pieces that I've ever worked on. But what I'm seeing for people that are willing to work alongside their team is across industries, and particularly when I'm working with executives and their teams, there is well and truly this hidden leadership crisis that is happening. And what AI is doing is actually shining a spotlight on it. So we've got leaders who are incredibly busy. We've got diaries that are crammed with back-to-back meetings, endless reporting, firefighting, checking in on teams and chat and Slack and gosh knows what else. But despite all of this busyness, the progress is really still stalling. And it's what I'm starting to call busyness without impact. And in fact, I was just reading an article it was in HBR, Harvard Business Review, called Work Slop. And it's the idea that AI is destroying productivity. And I love the term work slop. I think we've heard the idea of brain rot if you've been listening and doom scrolling. That's become kind of mainstream, but this idea of work slop, and I'm like, yes, people are really, really tuned into whether something has been written by AI, but also if you've played with AI, it kind of just keeps going. Like it's a never-ending rabbit hole that you can go into. And I use ChatGPT sometimes in my business, and it will be like, "And do you want me to do this?" And I'm like, "Yes, I do." "And do you want me to do this?" "Yes, I do." And all of a sudden, I have more work than what I actually wanted in the first place. So HBR, work slop, the idea that AI is destroying productivity, 100%. And AI isn't going to solve work slop, and it's not going to solve busyness. In fact, without the courageous leadership, AI can actually make it worse. So what we're really needing leaders to do is to shift their mindset. So if you introduce AI and simply think, great, now my team can do more faster, what you're really missing is the point. So what happens is you accelerate burnout, you replace one grind with another grind. And I know for so many of you that that's not actually what you want to do. But what we want to be thinking about is reframing AI as augmentation. So it is as the tool to create space for creativity, for connection, for problem solving. That's when we really start to unlock the real value of AI. So there are some risks around misuse, which if you have read the news, you will know. If you have used any kind of discernment at all when using AI, you will know that there are absolutely some risks of misuse. Most largely, I think the fact that it's not regulated in any way. So there is a lot of cowboys and cowgirls out there. But when AI is brought in purely as a cost-cutting tool, leaders really risk speeding up burnout. And imagine giving your people an AI tool that halves their admin load, but instead of creating space, you double their workload. And I'm like, oh, I think this is happening a lot. And suddenly people are doing more faster with no extra support. Engagement is going to be collapsing because everyone's, busy, 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 and trust starts to corrode. And we do not want that in the workplace. You do not want that as a leader. You do not want that if you are trying to get some of your team, trying to get your team into that high performing space. We do not want to erode any of the trust. So we've seen this recently in the news with some call centers that, AI might handle basic inquiries. And rather than reducing the pressures, what it does is it just adds more and more calls to each person's queue. And the result is typically that staff turnover spikes, even though the technology, air quotes, actually worked. So when we're going, okay, what are we going to do about this with the leadership challenge? Again, I think it always comes back to courageous leadership. So leaders who get it right frame AI as augmentation, not replacement. So they might say something along the lines of, this will take the grind off your plate so you can do the work that matters. They might say something along the lines of, this isn't about doing more for less. It's creating space for creativity and care. Very different attitude towards leadership. They might, back up some of this introduction of AI as an augmentation by protecting things like well-being and creating guardrails and investing in training. Goodness me, investing in training so that people are set up for success. Leaders are set up for success. And one of the professional services firms that I work with, the leaders introduced AI to help draft some proposals. And initially the staff were like pretty anxious. Is this the beginning of the end for us? Will we become null and void? But the leadership team got in front of it, of that narrative, and they started holding these forums where they explained the role of AI and made it clear that the tool was here to support consultants and not replace them. And I think for leaders, for exec teams, for any of those larger pieces of work that are going to be really rolling out and can be perceived as being a replacement, getting ahead of the narrative and going, what is it that we're actually looking to achieve by bringing this particular tool in. So the result for this particular client was that staff started to really embrace the change. They started experimenting, and they even built some new skills around refining the AI outputs instead of the resistance, because the team was engaged. And I think part of that, and you'll know that I talk about communication a lot, communication and getting ahead of that so that we are really clear about why we're doing the things that we're doing is so important when it comes to implementing any kind of change, particularly when we're implementing something that has been done by the people part for such a long time. So we really need to be focusing on that real leadership shift. And here's the challenge for leaders, now and into the future. It's not about knowing every detail of AI. It's about creating the environment where AI can really flourish without fear. And I think that means, having a level of transparency. So no hidden agendas, communicate clearly and truthfully. Really having a look at capability. So building the AI literacy into leadership development. So making sure that people actually know how to use the tool that they're trying to use and what that actually means for them. And then courage. So holding firm when others want to push for speed over sustainability. I just head-butted my own microphone. If that banged in your ears, then sorry about that. Because at the end of the day, AI, it doesn't erode leadership, it actually demands more of it. So more clarity, more courage, more care, all of the things. You were made for more. Don't forget about that. This shift requires leadership courage, courage to communicate openly, courage to redefine success, the courage to measure things differently, and the courage to admit that sometimes you don't have all the answers, but you're willing to learn alongside your team. That is so, so important. Now, part 3, we are talking about what this actually means for your workplace. So, yes, there will be changes. This isn't just abstract it is already here. It is already amongst us. There will be changes to roles, to skills, and the culture is shifting really, really quickly. Role changes, of course, are going to happen. They have. If we were to look back, we would see that role changes have happened historically. It's just happening a lot faster. So we're more aware of it now. But if I go 2035, so in 10 years, of course, I think it's going to be less than that. We know that AI will reshape up to 1 in 3 jobs in Australia. So that doesn't mean job losses across the board. It means tasks within the jobs will transform. Now, all of my HR professionals are probably going, oh my gosh, that means new job descriptions. Yes, it probably will. So if that is not in your plan, I would start putting some time in your plan for that. And when I say plan, what I mean is in your like your project plan, what have you got to do over the next, 12 months, 3 years, 5 years, is there will be a significant project around job descriptions and job roles changing and having to navigate that as well. So that's just a little side note there. Um, but one of the things to really think about is the winners of this transition period that we're going to be going through, this augmentation period, is the winners won't be the ones who cling to the old ways. And we know that we've always had someone, Polly in the back who's like, oh, it's the way we've always done it. Yeah, they're not going to be the winners in this in this scenario. It'll be the ones that adapt roles to leverage both the human and the AI strengths. So when we're talking about skills that are shifting, leaders and employees, so leaders and staff alike, will need a new skill set, new skills in the toolbox, so to speak. And I think there's probably 3 key ones that will need a stronger focus. And that is IT. No, it's not IT literacy. It's AI literacy. So this is not coding, but understanding what AI can and can't do. There'll be the adaptability. So the ability to pivot fast when strategies or tools change, whilst also maintaining the ability to assess what the impact will be down the line. So we want to have that ability and the adaptability, but also that discernment. And I'm going to keep talking about discernment for a little while in the following weeks, because it is really critical skill that I think we're forgetting is important. And emotional intelligence. So emotional intelligence, or EQ, has been around for a long, long time. It is going to be coming, the forefront of skills that we need. The human skill of connection, of empathy, influence, that no algorithm can replace. So a recent McKinsey survey found that 89% of executives now rank adaptability as a top skill for the future, and 64% see AI literacy as critical for leaders. And that's pretty significant when we're talking about what are skills of the future. I think there is an opportunity for culture as the differentiator. So, the piece that's often overlooked is that AI doesn't replace culture, it amplifies it. So if your culture is one of fear, AI adoption will create more fear. If your culture is one of trust, then AI adoption will actually strengthen that trust. So being really clear and understanding where your culture is right now, and if that is something that you want to amplify, then great. If it's not, then we want to get the culture fixed first. What does this actually mean for you? Well, it means that AI doesn't just change, the day-to-day tasks. It will actually change every fabric of how we work. Leaders can't afford to sit on the sidelines anymore. Cruising is no longer an option. And, hoping that it all kind of works out is no longer an option either. So we do need activity. We do need leaders to step into the arena. We need them to actively be shaping the culture, the capability, and the cadence when it comes to leadership. Again, 3 of the C's out of my Rise of the Courageous Leader book, if you want to grab yourself a copy there. Because without leadership, better not be leadership, without leadership AI adoption is just technology. And with leadership, it actually becomes a transformation. And we are in an era of transformation. My business is entirely around transforming leaders, transforming teams, transforming cultures and strategy and workforces. So transformation is really key right now. I have been chatting for a long time. I was going to do some case studies, but I might actually record that as a separate episode because I think it deserves its own part in the world. But really, the takeaway here today is without courageous leadership, any of this AI implementation, adaptation can be a disaster. So, really thinking about how you want to set your teams up for success, how you want to set your organization up for success, and really going, okay, in the next 5-ish years, what are going to be some of the disruptors to our industry? What are going to be some of the disruptors that are going to impact the way that we work so that you are not one of those businesses that at the end of the day goes, oh, we could have changed, we could have pivoted, but we didn't see it coming. You need to make time to see these things coming. It is so important to really have that planning in place for the third wave that we're currently going through for the future of leadership. Thank you so much for tuning in today. If you want to grab a copy of the special report, head to the link or head to the website and you can grab a copy there. It is free to download, so do that. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends and also subscribe on either, Apple Podcast or Spotify or wherever it is that you are listening in around the world. Thank you so much, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye for now.